We have an algorithm that scans across Spotify, YouTube, TikTok. We're tracking around 1 million artists a week that are unsigned. And the idea is to find, like we said, these diamonds in the rough. And essentially what we do is then we go to them and we say, Ari, you're doing incredible as an independent artist. We think you're going to make $100,000 the next 2 years. We can advance you 70% of that. And now let us use our toolbox to improve and increase your listenership, and help take you to the next level and maximize the value of your music.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book, 3rd edition, out now everywhere. However you like books, audiobook, ebook, hardcover, you can find the book. Today, my guests are Ankit Desai and Mira Howard from Snafu Records. Now, Snafu Records is not a traditional record label. They're definitely not a major label, and they're, I guess, technically an independent label, but their deal structures are very, very different. There are no textbooks out there that have written about this kind of model of record deal. I'll let them explain to you how they work. But what is impressive, they have over 20 Grammy nominations. They have hundreds of millions, actually at this point, probably billions of streams, and they're profitable. And every single artist, they said, is profitable, which you would think like, oh, well, that should be a given, right? I mean, it should be. But when you look at the major label model, when only 2 to 5% of their artists are profitable, the other 95%, 98% don't recoup the costs of their advance and then don't stay on for a second album. They get dropped before their second album or anything like that. This is actually very impressive. They're investing in artists. They have really innovative, impressive technology to find and discover artists, to A&R, to actually seek out the artists that make sense for their business model. So really fascinating conversation. We go into a lot of where the state of the industry is, where it's heading, why they got into this. Ankit comes from the major label system. He was working inside major labels and then figured out he could do it better and differently that was more artist friendly. So I had them on because I appreciate the innovation that they are bringing to the industry. They are very artist-centric, very artist-focused. And in preparation, because I wanted to make sure, they're actually doing good work, we spoke with a lot of their artists just to make sure that they had good experiences with Snafu. And the feedback by and large was the artists were also very happy. So I'm excited for you to listen to this conversation. And as always, I'd love to hear your feedback. So you can, leave a comment on YouTube. You can leave a comment on Spotify. We read those. You can always write into us, info@aristake.com. You can find Snafu Records online, on the Instagram, on their website, all of that. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. Visit aristake.com. Get on the email list, though. If you just want to pause this and go to aristake.com, get on the email list. That's where you're going to get the most up-to-date, relevant information about the new music business. We'll ping you new episodes, new guides, new info that you want. But if you could just actually pause this right now, click the pause button, hit that 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, follow, subscribe, just take those small actions. That really helps. If you want us to stay in your feed, you want us to keep making these, that really helps. All right, let's kick it in the show. Ankit and Mira, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so good to be here, Ari. I mean, we've been big fans for a long time, and and especially Mira. I think I don't want to embarrass you, Mira, but I think your podcast was actually Mira's entryway into the music business in the beginning. So this is is a nice closing of the circle.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear. Oh, right on. Thanks. Happy to help on your journey, Mira.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So cool. Well, what you guys have been doing with Snafu is really innovative, and I think it's the music industry is kind of over the last, I would argue, 20 years been in this spiraling turmoil where nobody really knows the pathway forward or what to do. And we've always been kind of looking towards the majors for guidance. and I say the royal we, like you and I have not been, but the
Right.
rest of the industry and the talking heads and the publications and everybody is like bowing down to these major labels as like, oh, please show us the way. And it's like, it's been frustrating and infuriating to me as somebody who comes from, an independent mindset, a DIY artist mindset, as in just like, the majors have never known what the fuck is going on. They've never guided us in the right direction. And I'll say this to their faces. Like, I don't care. I have said this in the past. It's just like, they've been coming from a place of fear and, just appealing to their shareholders and making the numbers work at the end. And what ends up happening is artists get left in the dust. They've never looked out for artists ever. Like, we've heard the horror stories of the artists from the 70s, 80s, 90s, but then even over the last 20 years, it's arguably possibly even worse. And so it's like, as in like this TikTok era where they have been just like scrambling to sign whatever viral moment is happening. Nobody knows what to do or what's going on. Complete artist investment has been lost. There's been no artist investment from the major labels. They just like take what's buzzing and is already working and be like, hey, trust us. Here's $1 million check and like sign your entire life away to us. And that's supposedly what's supposed to happen. Like, that's what they're arguing is the future of the music industry. It's just like, it's wild to me that as the major labels continue to lose market share, and the latest numbers that, came out last year is like, independents have over 35% of the global recorded music market share. And we're still looking, and as the majors continue to stumble and, make mistake after mistake, I mean, what, Lucien Grange and Universal went through with the battle with TikTok, losing the battle with TikTok. Like, why are we still looking to them as just like the almighty beings just because they're like $1 billion valued, whatever? So this is all to say, and I'm going to end my rant and then pass the conch over to you guys to talk about it. But I wanted to set this up because, like, I think it is that we're like at a serious turning point in the industry where we need innovators and we need people and companies and organizations that are thinking about things differently. And that's what I was impressed that you guys are. So for everybody listening, and either one of you, feel free to take this. Just give me a breakdown of, feel free to respond to anything I said, but also give us a foundational breakdown of what Snafu Records is and what you're doing.
Fantastic. No, thank you for a great setup there, Ari. I can give a quick introduction. My name is Ankit Desai. I'm the CEO and founder here at Snafu Records. And Snafu, by the way, as you probably know, stands for Situation Normal, All Fucked Up. And that, we kind of started that with in mind with with what was going on in the music industry, right? That like you have to be comfortable with chaos. Everything is always going to break, and it's not always the best artists that end up surviving. It's the ones that are most adaptable. And that was really like a message that we took to heart. And so, funny enough, the genesis story of Snafu starts actually at the major label record corporation, and so my background is that I was working with digital strategy at Universal Music, and I have to admit a little bit right place, right time, because I was here in Scandinavia, where obviously the birthplace of Spotify. But also, I got into the music industry at a time when Avicii was taking off, Swedish House Mafia were taking off. Tove Lo
what year are we
was
talking here? This is
2015, 2014, 2015.
Sure.
So it was my first job out of school. And, I had a background in economics and data science. And that was kind of where we felt, after essentially trying everything, they would sometimes, come to us and go like, hey, like we're getting all these numbers from Spotify. Can you see if you can, make some sense of them? And so that was actually how we started, making the first, I guess, hit prediction algorithms of like, is this an artist that we should be investing in or not? And I would say this, like I said, it's 2015. So streaming wasn't really even accepted as a business model in like the US, UK, and a lot of other territories.
Right.
So we're really kind of privileged to be maybe a handful of people in the world that maybe had access to a lot of consumption data, but also maybe be in a position to do something about it. And essentially that, we started building like the first algorithms, and it was, we worked with Tove Lo, Avicii, Swedish House Mafia. And Tove Lo then ended up, going all the way up to number 3 on the Billboard chart, which is huge for like a Swedish artist. And that was my ticket to Hollywood, essentially. And so I worked at Capitol Records.
You didn't even have to go through Simon Cowell.
I know. I was more data driven in this case. And so I work after working there for a year. I think we saw this one number, which, I'm sure like a lot of your listeners are attuned to as well, that at that time, 70% of all the music consumption in the world was between the 3 major labels. Now, as you know, it's down to like 65. But they accounted for less than 1% of all the new music that was coming out in the world. And that was kind of the, where it really struck me that there must be some girl in her bedroom in Indonesia that's making incredible music the world's dying to hear. But that bridge to connect them just doesn't exist today. So imagine if we kind of built an algorithm that can listen through all the music in the world, identify these diamonds in the rough, and hopefully give them a platform to succeed. To maybe paraphrase you, like to have a million Simon Cowells always on and always listening, that can give you a big break. And
that sounds so scary.
I know, with slightly less scary feedback and aggression, but yeah.
No, and so that's really the genesis of Snafu. Like I quit my job, we set up in like a hotel lobby in Stockholm, and we'd built a very healthy and growing business, but really kind of when it took off and it, I would say, really started to scale and we started to see incredible momentum, was when Mira came on board and we started focusing on artist catalogs specifically. And with that, Mira, I'll hand over the baton and let you introduce yourself.
Yes, and just before we get to you, Mira, and you're welcome to answer this, but I just want to clarify, because before we get into the catalog discussion, that was a great background, Ankit, on you, but I still don't understand what the business model of Snafu is or how you're finding the diamonds in the rough. So I want to touch on that first before we get into the weeds of like what you've discovered through this process, because I still want to just lay out how Snafu is, what you're doing. What is this?
Gotcha. Well, so the idea with Snafu is we have an algorithm that scans across Spotify, YouTube, TikTok. We're tracking around 1 million artists a week that are unsigned, and the idea is to find, like we said, these diamonds in the rough. And essentially, what we do is then we go to them and we say, Ari, you're doing incredible as an independent artist. We think you're going to make $100,000 the next 2 years. We can advance you 70% of that. And now let us use our toolbox to improve and increase your listenership, and help take you to the next level and maximize the value of your music. So that's in a nutshell kind of what Snafu does. We try to identify artists with our technology, and then we have a toolbox to help them improve. So today, a little over 200 artists, around 5,000 songs across the roster, and our artists count around a little bit over 20 Grammy nominations between them, and then there's one Miss World in there as well.
What does Miss World mean?
Like the pageant.
Oh,
like
you have
America,
like a Miss America, like
world.
a Miss Universe or whatever. That
Exactly.
you have a beauty queen. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Wait. So just so I understand this, and I just want to make sure that we all are on the same page of what you're doing. So these million artists that you're monitoring, where do they come from? How do you select these million artists? What is this threshold that you're looking at here?
So generally, it's anywhere from it's essentially artists that are making anywhere from like a few $100s a month to the biggest like unsigned artists. So essentially, we want to have the pool be as big as possible. But generally, what we're looking for is someone somewhere in the world raising their hand and saying, "I think this is a good song." So it could be in addition to a playlist, it could be a mention on a blog post, it could be a TikTok post about that artist. And so we try to kind of be as comprehensive as possible in scraping all the available data sources.
Okay.
So we cast a quite wide net, but then really what we're looking for then is engagement, growth and velocity, and most importantly, stickiness, which is repeat listening.
Interesting. So is it because I've spoken to companies similarly in the past that invest based on historical streaming data and streaming revenue, and that's at this point now a pretty straightforward approach where you see, okay, I've made $50,000 on this song over the last 5 years. I think I'm going to make another $50,000 over the next 5 years. We'll write a $50,000 check. We'll advance you that money. We'll make it back. That's fairly straightforward. But it's always how I've seen in the past, it's been people essentially like applying for this, or they've gone through and they've studied they've had to go into the distributor data just to verify those numbers. So you're taking if I understand this correctly, a slightly different approach where it's not solely based on the revenue. You're looking at other data sources. You're seeing, okay, there is some fan engagement. Now, I'm curious if you're addressing this issue in the sense that streaming has been great for passive listenership in terms of the revenue. And it's not been great for artists with super fans in the sense that, let me just break it down. If you have, let's say, 10,000 super fans who listen to your music 10 times a month, like that is significant. That means that is hardcore fandom, But
Absolutely.
if I'm doing the math right, that's only 100,000 streams or something a month. That's not really going to bring in that. That's not a livable revenue. That's not livable revenue.
300.
Yeah. And so, but like, that is hardcore fandom. So streaming hasn't really addressed that. And that's kind of the issue that we're at. Whereas there are, that artist with those 10,000 super fans could monetize them theoretically in a different way. They could tour. We're seeing actually that they have successful touring careers. And nothing that I've seen has like bridged this gap necessarily where it's like we have fans and we're getting paid for that because of our music. It's kind of like we're getting paid from streaming because like we've worked the algorithm. We're getting paid from streaming because we got to include it on big playlists. But we're not getting paid from streaming because our fans, and it's this weird thing right now. So maybe does Snafu address that at all? Or is your business model just what Spotify and streaming is because of the pro rata streaming model is based on passive listenership? It doesn't matter who these listeners are. If you're making money on streaming, we're here to help you jumpstart that.
It's an issue that we've debated a lot internally as well, because I think, one of the big things that we've tried to say is if Snafu one day gets big enough, you can hopefully like help more creators be able to like live off of their art. And now, because there's so much more music coming out into the world, we're almost kind of going towards a thing of less and less creators that are able to like live off their art because it's so diffused. And so interestingly, a lot of our client or our artist base like tends to skew towards artists with super fans because we tend to try to go after ones that have high repeat listening, high engagement patterns, and so on.
Okay.
But with that said, I will say generally across the board, and at least from what we've seen, most super fan engagement initiatives have been like relatively low hanging fruit. So, we've seen like a lot of artists use an advance that we've given them to go and do merch, to go on tour. Like several of those artists end up then going on tour. Several of those artists end up doing So one of our artists is like a big is a virtuoso guitarist, and he started like a Patreon to then kind of for guitar heads to to follow him. So we definitely, I mean, we've definitely had to help our artists develop playbooks for how to monetize those super fans.
Yeah.
But our bread and butter has very much kind of gravitated towards the streaming world, and that's because that's the part that's easiest to quantify, right? And that's the area that then investors eventually have like most comfort with, and so on.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you clarifying that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that I think, there's a super fan, like you talked about a gap in the industry, but I think another gap that like kind of to the whole day that we've seen is like the gap of like a human connection. Because one strategy for a super fan, capturing an artist might not want to do it. That might not be who they feel comfortable being. That might not be something that they are even interested in. So having like bespoke strategies that are done on like a human level, informed by data, but executed by people, I think is one of our greatest strengths. So for example, we have like a video game artist, and he does have a ton of super fans. We have been talking with like AI video game companies to try to help him get into that space more. We're trying to come up with ways to like do fan compilation albums for the video game he's featured on, like help him increase his TikTok like short form content so his super fans can engage with that. And then from there, we can take it and help, monetize that even further through vinyls or something like that. But he has to be involved in that as much as we do, if that makes sense. It has to be a partnership.
Totally. So, yeah, no, that makes sense. When you mentioned earlier, Ankit, how you are monitoring artists with, making maybe just a couple $100s a month from streaming all the way up to the biggest, unsigned, you call them. I like calling that. I don't like the word unsigned personally. The term unsigned, I like independent, because unsigned, that makes it seem like that they are waiting to be signed or that they're not signed yet. And so I've removed unsigned from my vocabulary. You speak how you want to speak. That's fine. I'm just saying I'm not.
Like
I don't like
unmarried versus single kind of.
Exactly. No, it's just like unmarried. It's like, yeah, thank you, Mira. That is a perfect analogy. That is exactly why I don't use the word unsigned. Because some artists, most of the artists that I have on the show, who don't have label deals, and also it's a very binary, and I don't want to go out too much on a tangent, but it is like a very binary discussion then if you're like unsigned, signed. Because what does signed even mean these days? If they're signed to Snafu, are they signed? Are they still unsigned, Or if they're working with like STEM for distribution, are they signed or are they unsigned? That's kind of like a label services distribution hybrid. Is that signed? So I think what you were referencing, and just I want to clarify it, is you mean unsigned actually meaning to a major label? Is that what you were meaning when you say unsigned?
What I mean is artists that could potentially work with Snafu. And so that's exactly.
Okay.
So if you're on a major label, you're obviously already off the table for us. If you're also on a large indie label, they generally don't want somebody else, working with artist strategies for them, and so that also doesn't become as relevant. So I completely agree with you in terms of the nomenclature there. But yeah, so when I say unsigned, I mean, let's say I'm referring to the universe of artists that could potentially sign for Snafu.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. So just getting back to that, just want to get to the point where you're saying, artists that were making a couple $100 a month. See, that wouldn't be something necessarily if I was in Snafu's position, where understanding the business model, I see the historical revenue that you've made from streaming. I can extrapolate from that, say, future project, you're going to make same amount over the next 3 years. Here's a check for the next 3 years. I'm going to tack a little percentage on top of that to make some profit from that. And I believe that's the business model. But seeing those, like, what are you looking at when you see the artist only making a couple $100 a month, to know that, okay, if we jump, because do the numbers to me don't work out. Like a couple $100 a month. I mean, unless you're just advancing like $5,000, which is significant over the next few years or whatever. Is that what it is, or are you taking risks like labels historically decades ago took risks in terms of like investing in an artist you believe in because you see the chatter and the super fans and whatever, and you believe that this could turn into something, and it just hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, I would say I think I would say my experience also like working in the major label world was that the model very much was we're going to sign 25 deals a year. 23 of them are probably not going to recoup. They're not going to work out. But then one or two are going to, sell platinum or better, and that pays for everybody else.
Yes.
But I also, generally found that if you're among those 23 out of the 25 that are unrecouped, your career can sometimes get shelved. You all of a sudden start getting like much worse service from your label because they've signed another 25 artists now that they're going to like take a punt on. And generally kind of, it starts a pattern of suffering for the artist that can take years to get out of, that then become independent artists and swear to, never go back into that madhouse again. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was that we want almost every deal we sign to be a win-win. So, we aim for, so in most cases, if it is an artist, it's making a couple of $100s a month. In most cases, the advance itself will not be huge. But what we do see is there's potential here. There's an artist that's actively creating content and putting stuff out. And there then we have the willingness in the toolbox to invest in helping them grow. So some of our biggest and best deals have started at that level. So one of our biggest artists actually is an artist called Sam McPherson. And, we signed him when he had like 20,000 monthly listeners. And I think now, now he's recently, I think, just crossed like 50, 70 million streams in a little bit over like a year and a half. And essentially like that's a little bit kind of what we want to do, in terms of creating a win-win, where we don't want to be in a situation where in a year or two, like the artist is still unrecouped and is like asking if we can continue, how what's the next step for them. It's more about kind of like giving optionality, of course, to the artist and also to ourselves to say, let's invest in this. Also, let's invest our resources in this until we see like something that sticks and takes off.
Yeah. And then one kind of philosophy that something that Ankit and I have talked about a lot and internally we've discussed a lot is this concept that I truly believe almost every single catalog is undervalued. And that's just because of the way that the music industry thinks about music. Like something I really love about your podcast and the way that you approach music, it's like a business, right? Every artist should think of themselves as like a mini business entity. And, I went to business school. Like a business would never leave cash uninvested. It would never leave an asset uninvested. It would never just like let assets lie there. Why do artists do that? Like every single artist, we still operate on this old model of like new release, promote the new release. You spend so much time and talent and blood and sweat and love and tears into releasing this new song, and then it's on to the next. Like it doesn't really make sense from a business perspective. I would say that's sort of what we've incorporated into our DNA is like a lot of our experience with like having that label side, investing it onto the catalog. Every catalog almost always gets forgotten the second it's released. So that's sort of like the value we try to bring in. And like, I think that's the biggest takeaway. Like if any artist is listening to this that I want them to take away is like, your catalog is your asset. Do not let it sit. Why would you wouldn't let your money sit in a savings account making like 0.1%. You would try to invest it into like some kind of bond. Like anyone with financial sense like knows that you need to invest in your assets. Why aren't we teaching artists the same thing? So we feel really passionate about that. And to that end, it's a little bit less about like the advance and how it's calculated and the data behind. That's super important. But like what our kind of philosophy is like, why is 70% of music consumption catalog, but it's not being invested in consistently by artists? So that's sort of where we try to come in and invest in that.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because that, I think, is news to a lot of people right now. A lot of definitely artists that are listening, that you said 70% of music consumption is catalog. And just to clarify, what do you mean by catalog? What is catalog music?
Yeah, there's different definitions for that, right? But like, I think for that, when was it older than 6 months?
18 months.
18 months, sorry. 1 year plus 6. Yeah, 18 months.
So a year and a half. Okay. So music that is over a year and a half old is considered catalog. And you're saying that, okay, so 70% of music consumption is catalog over a year and a half or more old. Now I can tell you, Mira, from the artist perspective, why we're moving on. And then, but I appreciate that you say from the business perspective why we shouldn't. And I actually just had, so from the artist perspective, why we move on the moment it's out. Or not really the moment, but a few months after it's out, it's artists are most excited about what they most recently written, and my newest song is my favorite song. It's and if I write then a song next month, it's most likely going to be my next favorite song. If I make a new recording, now that's my favorite recording that I've ever done, because everything that I've learned compounded into this. There are some recordings from a few years ago that I can't listen to. I cringe listening to. There might be people that love that. I get videos from people that are like learning it, singing that song, playing along to it, and like it's their favorite song. But I fucking hate that song. Like I can't, I'm embarrassed that I released it, famously Radiohead won't play Creep anymore. Arguably their biggest hit of all time. They fucking hate Creep. They're embarrassed by that song. They're not going to play it. They're not going to go down that road, but they obviously at this point don't need to play it. They have diehard fans that are there in spite of Creep. So that is the reason, if you're wondering why artists don't want to pay attention to that.
And I write music for fun. Like I get that. Like I think the cool thing about Snafu is a lot of people are artists or, like closet songwriters. So I totally get that. I think what the disservice, and maybe this is like a bigger societal opinion that I have, that we do to artists is no one likes to focus on the boring stuff that you don't want to do, right? It's the same with an asset. It's not fun to focus on. It's not saying that should be your passion and set you on fire. But why are artists taught that like everything you do has to be the most exciting thing ever? I think it's a disservice to them, because then what happens is then they don't actually reap the full benefit of what they could be reaping financially and career-wise. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying I don't get it. Of course I get it. Like obviously you want to focus on the new hot thing that your brain comes up with. Of course, that sounds like the most addicting thing. I mean, that is the most addicting thing in the world. But you need to be financially, career-wise, focusing on the part. And that's sort of why artists like to partner with us, because they don't want to focus on that. So we come in, we go, look, we'll do it for you. That's why we give you the advance, so we can invest in the catalog, because now we actually have a financial stake in doing so.
Yeah. So and yes, and I think it's an extremely important point that you're making, and I do want to clarify that it's like artists shouldn't be giving up on their catalog, because on the flip side, it's not just because they don't like what they did 2 years ago. You're right. We have been trained by the label system, by the DSPs, by Spotify saying release a new song every month, and that's the only way that you're going to work this algorithm. And so we're like, obsessive about that. Like, oh shit, if we got it, but we are seeing songs like I just had Fly By Midnight on the show, who I know was a Snafu artist as well. They talked about how a song of theirs caught on TikTok 2 years after it was released, and they're like, you know what? We're not. They're by the way super smart business guys, and they like get it, and they're not too multiple times. And I had to ask them, it's like, emotionally though, how are you doing this as artists? Because I can't bring myself to do what you're doing. Because it's like it's this hard battle that artists have. It's just like the business brain on one hand is just like, okay, I know I just heard Mira say that this is what I should be doing, and this is the logical standpoint, and this is what but then the emotional artist side takes over. But to that point, is like they were saying that a song that was 2 years old. They decided to make a video on TikTok for it. They intentionally went down that road of promoting this old song, which I thought was brilliant. And I like, I talk to the artists that, I work with, and I say the same thing. It's just like, don't give up on your catalog. Don't give up on the old songs. There's still life there if you still believe in it and still love that, because it's hard to convince artists to do anything that they don't believe in. And if it's promoting an old song, it's not gonna work. But there are so many artists, and I'm one of them, that still love a lot of the music that we've released in the past, even 10 years ago. Like I stand by my record that I released 10 years ago. And if one of those songs took off, hell yeah, I'm throwing a party. So I'm curious, like Mira, when you talk about you take over and you help work the catalog, what does that mean in practice?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we do that, and we're still developing a lot of the ways in tandem with the artists. I would say that like our pillars, and Ankit, you can touch on this too, but like I think our pillars really are like social media, unsurprisingly, tapping into the DSP playlists, and actually weirdly A&Ring within our roster, which sounds counterintuitive because I just talked so much about the catalog, and why is setting someone up with a different artist to make a new song a good idea? It's cross-pollination of audiences. The other thing is you can do remixes, you can reimagine songs, you can, if you feel like you have an idea or concept, like releasing new music will help jog the catalog as well. So I think like the two of them focus on the catalog specifically for catalog's sake, and one of them focuses on helping create that kind of like you're saying, the algorithmic rewards to then cross pollinate and regenerate the catalog. Am I missing anything, Ankit?
No, and I mean I can just add one quick thing in terms of why now, why essentially like why now feels like some sort of transformative moment specifically in terms of artists focusing on their catalog. If you think even a couple of years ago when essentially, getting on New Music Friday was the biggest thing in the world, and kind of Spotify playlists like the Today's Top Hits, the Rap Caviar, the main stages of the world, kind of drove a lot of music discovery. That has, I think everybody knows, like that has shifted a lot to short form video, right? And essentially now where a lot of discovery happens, also in the case of Fly By Midnight, short form video and algorithmic playlists like discovery mode. And so all of a sudden now, the main, you're essentially not limited by what a curator thinks, or also how many songs a curator can fill on their playlist. And even before that, going back to like why Frontline and Catalog were a division in the first place, how many CDs or vinyls you could stack up in a record shelf. Now you're essentially, in some sense, competing. Well, your new song is competing with all your previous songs that you've released. So, but also competing with all previous songs released by every other artist, and so in that sense, the bar for quality, I think, has gotten higher. But I think also for a lot of people that are artists that are interested in selling their catalogs as well. Like even like a few years ago, a lot of people that were buying catalogs, it was seen as a passive investment, like a passive income investment, right? That like Spotify will keep increasing, you're going to keep increasing 10% per year. It was a little bit like buying property and renting it out. And then that's basically it. You go to the next property. Now you can't do that anymore. Like you need to like actively be nurturing your back catalog because all your competition is doing that. So you can't count on that stable income coming forever because you'll start to get diluted.
So talk about actively nurturing the back catalog, and Mira, you touched on the pillars, but I do want to break those down a little bit, and it would be amazing if you could share more specifically what you mean by them. So you said, like, let's talk about the first one. You said social media. What does Snafu do specifically to help nurture the back catalog through social media?
Yeah, I mean, we do We do a lot, but I would say like the core of what we do is, like I mentioned before, like this one-on-one human interaction. So we actually will coach artists and give them custom strategies for their social media and check in on them. And, we have a course that delineates exactly what they need. And we're there to answer any questions, give them any ideas. And like some artists, like they don't want to do that. And look, that's fair. But like, I mean, our philosophy is always not to force artists to post things they don't feel comfortable about. It's always post what you like. Also, that's not going to resonate with anyone if you post something you don't like, right?
Right.
But like the amount of like success we've seen is very kind of inspiring. Like we have this like very cool female artist. She's a like piano player, not like, up and coming. She's like, she's had an established career. She's like, a little bit further along, and she hasn't really ever used social media too much. Like she's used it a little bit, but she followed like our course, and literally organically, just listening to like working with our coach, like our head of content, Anna, like following along with what she should do. She kept growing. Like she grew her TikTok 300% like within 8 weeks, and she had like one video get 400,000 views, and like we're seeing the results on the back catalog. And this is just like someone genuinely just playing piano in her room. And, that's it. Like there's nothing fancy. There's no crazy edits or anything like that. That's an example of how we would work with someone that's not like maybe a 20-year-old TikToker who can do all these crazy dances. Like we have a lot of stories like that. But that's like something we're really proud of, is like giving us like actual human one-on-one advice, almost like how the olden time record labels maybe used to do, like giving actual like handmade strategies to artists and being there.
That's awesome. So you have in-house. So talk about the people that work at Snafu, and talk about like who you have in-house and what are the various departments or whatever, because that's someone or a group of people that is essentially on the marketing team and the social media team, where everything's blurred these days. But basically, they're the ones that worked with this artist to come up with that idea for that video and told her like, here's how to make the video, here's how to shoot it, here's how to post it, here's what to say, here's what, and for someone that is not native to TikTok or just social media in general, that is a heavy lift. And so I'm curious, like, talk about the personnel.
100%. And I can, give one more shout out, to the content personnel, just in terms of exactly like you said, we have started to look at short form content as a new music video. And the way that we treat it then is that every piece of the content then needs to be choreographed. And that's kind of like where we help you do that to the extent that you want. So we have this one artist called Alfie Castley. We took him from more or less 0 to now 150K plus followers on Instagram. And on his latest song, essentially this choreographed version worked so well, and it went so viral that his first show he played for 15 people about a year ago. Last week he played for 15,000 people on tour with Take That across Europe, and but so just onto your point of kind of where you get hand-holding and expertise in terms of exactly what you need to do, and then there's a lot of trial and error. But as long as the artist together with us puts in the time, we generally make it work. Then in terms of the personnel, so that's kind of the content team. Then we have like a marketing and distribution team that does, playlist pitching, that works on the distribution side of things, that makes sure kind of, because a lot of artists want to then redistribute with us as well. So they bring in their music and we make sure it's registered correctly. And in a lot of cases, especially if you're coming from like the DIY world, and maybe you haven't looked at at Ari's courses, you maybe don't know how to register correctly or get your music, or monetize your music in the best way. And so there we have help. We have a pretty significant A&R team of people in Stockholm, North America, and Latin America that have the most kind of like day-to-day contact with the artist. And then we have, of course, an engineering team, like a product team, that builds our Snafu's internal platform. So there you're able to see you're able to see the pretty basic stuff like analytics, when you'll recoup and so on. But also, like Mira mentioned, we have internal courses where, you can go on your own, essentially on your own pace. And then if you have questions, we're able to like jump in and help you out at any time.
Amazing.
As well as yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned marketing and distribution, which I wanted to get to that second pillar that Mira was mentioned before, which was the playlists. Talk to me about what is the playlisting strategy for catalog music?
Yeah, I mean, there's the classics. So like we do a lot of remixes, and like I said, we'll put in touch existing artists on our roster together. So the new distro, we make sure we pitch it. We have good relationship with editorials, blah blah blah, which is always great.
Okay.
But then we also are building playlists around our catalogs and investing into those. So for example, we have a lot of like Latin artists. So this is sort of like a emerging endeavor, but we're trying to actually like design our playlists around our catalog and like invest into those and interlace it with other music. And, Spotify does work really well when your music is looped in with other artists that are similar. That triggers the algorithm to then put you in playlists that are like that. Yeah, that's like it's
Cool.
sort of like, it's kind of, I always think of things like, it's kind of like dieting or anything like that. It's like, it's always the things that you kind of know about, but you just have to do more effectively, like eat healthy, exercise, like get on the right organic playlists and do that like in a really like organic, authentic way, and find people who actually like the music through them.
And not buy streams.
Don't
not buy streams. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
I hope we're past that point where people think that it's a smart business decision to buy streams and get on botted playlists or like just get bots or pay $1,000 to get 10 million streams or it's like that's all right. We've covered that a lot on this show, and I've written about that in Variety and written about this a lot, and like that's just anyone listening, if this is their first introduction, that is the worst. Don't ever pay for a service where they say we will promise you X number of streams for Y number of dollars. It's always a scam, and it's not going to work, and it's bots.
It will
and
get your music taken down.
Yeah, and not only will it get taken down, it just fucks up your algorithm. And so like what you were just talking about, Mira, of just like the whole point, which is like, and I want to hold on that for a moment because that's like, it is a brilliant strategy, and we use it here. Some of our East Take artists and students and stuff like that, I've worked with marketing agencies, and this is a very, very smart strategy. And just to like break it down a little bit further of what you're talking about, so you make a playlist of popular artists that your target demographic for the artist that you're looking to promote would like and get into. And then you start, I'm assuming, running ads, social media ads to that playlist to then build up the followers and build up the listenership, more importantly, really, to that playlist. People are self-selecting. They'll go to the playlist, be like, oh, I love these artists. Absolutely, I want to listen to this playlist. Then you insert your artists that are similar to those other artists, or more importantly, that these listeners would then get into your artist, and that's the demographic you're going to. And then, of course, you're running the ads from the markets, and you're focusing these ads just on the demos of the audience that you're looking to target. And then by that method, those listeners trigger the Spotify algorithm for your songs and your artists to then get placed into more algorithmic, personalized playlists to listeners similar to those, right?
So, as well as optimizing the playlist itself for search. I would think about SEO on like a web page. We try to think about SEO for kind of how an artist is going to show up on Spotify.
Cool. Yeah. And it's funny because playlist creation and building has become its own ecosystem and its own business model, like with platforms out there like Groover or Submit Hub or these like, these or even like Playlist Push, like these platforms where artists can pay for consideration from these playlist curators, third-party playlist curators, to be put in their playlist. It's that kind of method, but and it's to those playlisters' benefit to have valuable playlists that are active and have high listenership because they get more submissions and they make more money that way. But it makes more sense for you and artists themselves and labels and managers to just keep this in-house if they have the budget. Now, it takes a lot of money and a lot of time and effort to build up these kinds of playlists, which I've done, and I know the effort, and it does take an investment. But you can control that process. And when you're submitting to these third-party playlisters, you can't really 100% tell that they're not botted or that they're going to have the listenership that you're going for, exactly right. So that's cool. And I appreciate you being so transparent with that. Now, we actually haven't really covered what the business model of Snafu is. And so if you could just break down to me what is the business model of Snafu?
It's very simple. We identify undervalued artists, and then we partner with them to license the rights, generally between anything from 2 to 5 years.
Okay.
And we get
for the whole catalog or just certain songs?
It's almost always the whole catalog, but we've done deals for certain songs as well. Like a lot of times an artist will start with a couple of songs and then expand to the whole catalog. And then, as you know, of course, like we basically recoup on the advance, and then our standard deal is 70-30, so 70% in favor of the artist.
Okay, cool. Pretty straightforward. That's great. Yeah. Extremely favorable deal for the artists. I'm glad that you said 70% in favor of the artist, because for people listening that don't know, the standard major label deal is 82-18 or 85-15 in favor of the label. And the artist is only making 15-18% or something like that. And the standard indie label deal is 50-50. So you're even beating that, where you're giving 30% to the artist. Now, I'm assuming, I know that Snafu is funded with outside revenue. You're very public about this. You've raised, multiple rounds of funding through VCs, et cetera, like the traditional startup path. I'm curious if this is a profitable business model.
So almost every deal that we do is profitable. So and that's what I mentioned, right? That like we design almost every single deal to be profitable in the short term. So, that's really kind of what I feel the most important part of our business is, that it needs to be a win-win both for us and for the artist. Because if we want to make the impact that we want on the music industry, we need to be really big. And to get really big, we need to grow ourselves. And I think it's just a question of, the way that we talk about it with artists as well is it's 70-30, 70% in the artist's favor. But then even our 30%, we use it essentially to pay the salaries of our employees that will work on your behalf to improve the value of your 70%. And 200 plus artists now, so far so good. And it's because I think it's also, this is now like the 5th year that we're running Snafu. And I think a lot of, especially like venture capital backed startup companies, have often been tempted by, let's raise a lot of money and then try to take as much market share as possible. We'll make a loss in the beginning, and then, but we'll have a big market share and then we can raise prices, right? The classic startup, path, unfortunately. And we've been, now in hindsight, we've been quite fortunate to have more patient investors that also come from the music industry and understand the music business, that it takes, it takes time to build something that's long-term sustainable. And I have to say, we've kind of had trial and errors of our own on the path to here. And now kind of, when we found a model that really works both for us and for our artists, now, we're really scaling up as much as we can.
Awesome. Very cool. No, that's great to hear. And I'm glad to hear that the investors are patient, but also that it's a profitable business model, because like you said, the major label system is only profitable because of the 2%, 5%, whatever it is, that make up for the 95% plus of failures, the amount of money that they invest that they never recoup back from those artists, and that's their business model. So you're saying that almost 100% of the artists that sign with Snafu are profitable both ways for themselves and also for you. That's great to hear. Now, I know there's a lot of artists and managers listening to this right now that are like, how do I work with Snafu? This sounds amazing. I want investment. I want that support. Like, that's a great deal. Like, so is it really is your model where you monitor these million artists or so and then you seek them out, or does it ever go the other way where artists come to you and then you look into them and yeah, so how do you find new talent, and if artists want to work with you, is that even possible?
Yeah, you go.
I was gonna say, if you're a friend of Ari, then you're always welcome. But no, but I guess like, in addition to that, I think we always say internally, you never know where the next hit is going to come from. With that said, like we are a data-driven company. We try to be as data-driven as possible. If you're, if you're an artist or manager that that wants to work with us, I think we almost always put it through our algorithm, even if that's not how we found the artist initially. So generally, like we try to be as disciplined as possible in terms of, both not just like the deal that we do with an artist, but also then how we work them, and and try to be professional about it. But so definitely our DMs are open, and we love listening to new music.
Nice. Mira, I read recently that you were kind of heading the Snafu Women's Creator Fund with $1 million dedicated to supporting and elevating female creators. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you brought that up. Basically, we have reserved $1 million of our fund to go for female creators because we noticed that despite having a really awesome, equitable team, like we're pretty much 50-50, if not skewing more female, which, as you know, in the music industry is like, whoa. We noticed that the amount of female artists that we had were like, maybe 20%. And it wasn't from anything intentional. It was more just like, analysis of what the algorithm gave us, right? So that's a systemic issue. And the best way to combat systemic issues is through like concerted effort, right? So we have reserved $1 million, and we're still building out like exactly like the infrastructure for supporting them. But we're building a internal women's mentorship program, so that every female artist that comes to us, in addition to all the the normal catalog growth and yada 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 that they'll get, which is super valuable, they will get female specific mentors that are like additionally there for them to help develop their careers, answer any questions. And then we're also working with a few organizations to see how we can try to empower like female engineers, producers, mixers, masters to actually work with some of the female artists that come in, so that they actually have a pool of female talent they can pull from. And so, yeah, we're really excited about that, and it's just cool to be able to like actually try to seek out some of those artists and sign them and try to be that extra support for them that sometimes they need, because it can be lonely being a female in the industry.
Definitely. Well, it's great to hear. And I, there are some organizations out there, like I believe it's called like Women in Music, and there's like especially with like you said, kind of producers, engineers, producers, engineers only make up, I think the most recent data was like 2% of all the records out there. It's wild. So I appreciate that you are investing in that, and that is necessary, and it is systemic because it has been so male dominated for so long. And so, yeah, this is kind of the support that is needed. So yeah, I very much appreciate you doing that.
Thanks.
Cool. So, before I let you go, this has been super inspiring and illuminating, and it's I just to bring it full circle, I appreciate that you guys are thinking differently and doing things differently, because the industry needs to get shaken up a bit, and it needs to do things differently. The status quo is just not working. And so, hopefully this conversation will inspire other people to think differently, other startups and organizations to do something in a similar way. Or just have more people, work with Snafu. Any way that just kind of, grows this in the manner that is healthy and forward thinking, and artist focused. Because for too long, it's never been artist focused. It's been business focused. It's been label focused, but it hasn't been artist focused. So before I let you go, I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Do you want to take it first, Mira?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about this because obviously love this question. Honestly, as someone who loves music and who writes music for fun in her bedroom, and also who works with a lot of artists that I really love, I think seeing one piece of work that you've created or that you've helped get out there affect someone's life in a positive way, I think that's what it means to make it. I know it sounds cheesy, but I actually really mean it. We had this really great song come out with actually both Alfie and Ronnie released these very powerful emotional songs, and just watching the fans' reactions on TikTok, they were really real. People can often belittle TikTok or social media, but it's a place to show real emotion, and it was just really cool to be part of something that affected so many people in a really positive way. That's what music is, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't agree more. I think from my side, if I think about why I quit my job at the major, to start Snafu, essentially, I keep going back to this number that almost 70% of consumption was between the three majors, but less than 1%, of new music. And put another way, the entire music industry as we know it is not built for 99% of the creators in the world, and that has to change. There's a wind of change, of democratization coming. And I think if we can, put our resources and technology to use to somehow help bring about that change, I think that would be a pretty worthwhile endeavor.
Ankit, Mira, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you so much, Ari. Thanks for your time.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids, with music by Brassroots District, and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.